I am Joel McLeod, and welcome to the 905er. Well, here we go again. Not even a full month out from the last federal election in Ontario, we're back at it. This time, however, it is to elect our federal government. Sunday, newly minted Prime Minister Mark Carney called for a general election. Only a few months ago, such a call would have been terrifying for the Liberal Party of Canada. Polls had shown that they would have been eviscerated by the public, in some cases, possibly reduced to a third-party status in the House of Commons. But then Donald Trump happened. The re-election of Trump has completely shifted the dynamic of politics in Canada. Trump's tariff war forced the Liberal Party to push Justin Trudeau out of office and then elect Mark Carney as their leader. The result has been a reinvigoration and a capture of momentum for the Liberals, the likes of which has not been seen in Canadian politics. Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives, with their message of a broken Canada, are finding it almost impossible to pivot to meet Canadians where they are right now. The question of how Canadian sovereignty and prosperity will be protected from the whims of Donald Trump is on the forefront of everyone's mind. We here in the 905 are uniquely concerned as whether it's an economic or military conquest by the Americans, we will be on the front line. So who in Canada is best suited to protect our sovereignty and our economy from Donald Trump? We are welcoming back to the podcast longtime friend Laura Babcock to dive into the start of this federal election and talk about what's at stake for the 905. Laura is the owner of Power Group Communications, a PR firm here in the 905, and she is also the host of The O Show. Laura joins me to talk about the state of federal affairs and why this moment is unprecedented in Canadian history and what we can all do about it. Thank you very much to Laura Babcock for coming back onto the 905er. We are doing this again in Ontario. We just finished a provincial election, and now we're back at it with a federal one. Thank you very much for coming back onto the podcast. It's been too long.
It's my pleasure. Anytime.
Yeah, so I guess the question that is on everyone's mind is like, we're doing this again. But this isn't quite how I think most people thought we would be doing a federal election. I think people thought that this was going to have a different feel, and we're. This is, I guess my question is this the election that anyone was really prepared for when we might have been talking about this, say, or summer of last year?
This is a situation that none of us are prepared for. You know, the night that Trump won the election, I was in Mexico. And when I found out in the middle of the night that he had in fact won, not by a huge plurality, it was 1% difference, but across the country, I let out kind of a primal scream, because I knew that we were going into uncharted territory. And as a strategist, uncharted territory is, never a comfortable feeling.
Right.
And I don't think any of us anticipated how incredibly grave the situation would become. I mean, back then, I was just concerned for American democracy. I was not concerned for Canada's sovereignty. So we are now in a situation that we could never have predicted, that we've never been through before. We are in a deluge of propaganda. We are fighting on all kinds of fronts. We are realigning our trade. We are in a situation where a federal election that was going to be about the Liberal record, about things like immigration and the carbon tax and all of the other pieces that Pierre Poilievre had put on the table for us, are all gone. It is
Right.
The ballot question is only one thing, which is who can best protect Canada from a hostile attack from Trump. I mean, even saying it out loud, Joel, makes me feel a little bit crazy, but it's the reality. And so we are not, I don't think any of us saw this coming. And I think we are, as Canadians, now voting in a binary situation, not even a multi-party situation. I mean, it really has thrown everything on its side.
I'd say yes. I mean, this was not what I thought the ballot question would be. This time last year, when you mentioned about how Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives were trying to frame the ballot question as a referendum on Justin Trudeau's tenure as Prime Minister. And before we came on here, I was bouncing around an idea in my head, and I want to run it by you. And I do want to say, I think the Conservatives won on that note, meaning if you saw their ads were, just inflation and the blaming the homeless crisis on Justin Trudeau and all these things, right? And the polls were in their favor. They were showing like a super majority leading up to an election. And they kind of got what they wanted. Justin Trudeau left.
Yeah.
He said, "Okay, guys, I finally got the message. My time is done. 10 years. Thank you very much. I'm out." And we now have Mark Carney as prime minister, the Liberal leader right now, I should say. And the Conservatives kind of their fortunes are seemingly plummeting. They've lost the momentum in the Canadian electorate. And I'm just wondering, did they kind of win? Like their entire campaign was based on Justin Trudeau. Justin
Yeah.
Trudeau, bad, we're good. Justin Trudeau's no longer in the equation.
Right.
And I'm wondering, like, is this kind of a question for the Conservatives? Like, be careful what you wish for.
Oh, exactly. It's the ultimate example of that. They pushed and pushed and pushed, and they were clever, and they
Mhm,
did their sloganeering, and they were following the MAGA playbook of 2016 that got Trump the election then. Axe attacks, boots not suits, jail not bail, all of those. Sounds like a Dr. Seuss book. They've done so many of those three-word rhymes. But they were having some stickiness factor, as
mhm,
Malcolm Gladwell would say. They were connecting. And our my neighborhood is full of F Trudeau flags, right? Like this was something that was going to bring Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives a majority. That's the territory they were in.
mhm,
And then Trump did a hard right to turn towards Canada. Now we can look at that in the history books. We'll look at who initiated that, where did that come from? It was, Manifest Destiny has been a doctrine since the 19th century in the United States, but what exactly made this the moment that Trump went for it? And I think that's a conversation Canadians are going to need to have. But the point you're making is that, yeah, Poilievre had this in a landslide. And so there hasn't been a moment in Canadian history, I don't think, where you can look at the political fortunes of two parties changing so dramatically. I mean, the graph was heading blue line up, red line down, and then the moment Trudeau left and Carney got in the race, even before he became the leader, those lines switched. And now Carney, if you look at the CBC poll aggregate, the poll tracker, it has the Liberals with a over 50% chance of a majority.
mhm,
So, I mean, at very least, we're in a neck and neck election, and the other party might get a minority, or in fact go to a majority. And the reason why majority territory is in play for the Liberals is because in a time of crisis, people can't really look at too many options. Things get very, very stark. And so this is really becoming a binary choice between the Liberals and the Conservatives. And you can see that by the erosion of support for the NDP. You can
mhm,
see that by even the Bloc in Quebec. Quebecers are looking at Carney and putting sovereignty of Canada over everything, so we're in this shocking moment. And there will be books written and long knives out for Pierre Poilievre if he manages to blow this massive lead. And I say that because he can't be blamed for what Trump is trying to do to Canada, but the proximity and the affinity to the MAGA movement in the US by the Canadian Conservatives is the reason why people are looking for an alternative to Poilievre. I mean, how can you vote for a party who seems to be in alignment? And as Danielle Smith just said on tape, Poilievre is in sync with the new direction of America. I mean, that should strike fear in the hearts of every Canadian. So, I mean, this is why they're in the trouble they're in.
we are going to come back to the Conservatives' woes, but there was one note that I did want to touch upon, in that I think we misread the polls, and prognosticators and pundits, and even the Conservatives misread the Canadian zeitgeist. And the reason why I say this is Angus Reid came out with a poll of kind of Justin Trudeau's approval ratings after he had resigned. And it was pretty much like a 50-50. I think it was like 47, 48% approval, disapproval, which to me was shocking because my understanding was all the media was saying we hated him. Like we were loathing Justin Trudeau. And this poll comes out and says, no, apparently we don't. We thought like, okay, you're kind of leaving on a traditional prime minister's, outing. Um, we don't hate you. We just say, okay, you did a fine job. Thank you very much for your service. Move on. We gave you 10 years. It's kind of like the unwritten rule in Canadian politics. We gave you 10 years. That's it. You got done what you're going to do. You got us
Yeah.
through COVID, child benefit. Um, thank you very much. We need somebody new. And because I was always struggling to figure out why did the polls. I've always found that Pierre Poilievre strike as a person strikes me as very unlikable. Like I've never met somebody who said I like that guy. He's just got the right vibe and the right demeanor that I want. I want my leader. And I've never heard anyone say like, yeah, I'm a Poilievre fan who wasn't a dyed-in-the-wool conservative. I did hear that about Trudeau, and I'm wondering like, was this a matter of just like a media tunnel vision, or was this a matter of the public were just saying, dude, your time is up, get somebody new in there. We have new issues. We just need new blood. And I'm just like, I get the feeling that the media did get this wrong to some
Oh,
extent.
you have no idea how many shows I was on where people said it was a guarantee that Pauline would have a majority, and I was like, says who? Right?
Right.
So I was critical of Trudeau's failure on a national housing strategy and on not having proper supports in place for immigration. And I'm passionate about working with people who are suffering in homelessness. So I had a lot to criticize Trudeau for, and I thought he dropped the ball the last few years. And I think a lot of Canadians were like, okay, time for something new. We don't like seeing our neighbors suffering. Let's try something different. But that it was never a hatred for Trudeau. It was a, tired, it's time for you to go. And I think that part of the numbers we're seeing as his legacy numbers are the fact that in the last month he rallied. He did the best of,
Right.
we're in an emotional war for the hearts and minds of democracy around the world. And Trudeau, drama teacher training, he's very good at the emotions. And he was very good at making Canadians feel as though we should unite. And I think Carney has more than taken that baton and taken it in a different direction, a much stronger
Mhm.
direction. But in the last, in the waning days of Trudeau's time, people looked at him and thought, okay, you know what? We don't hate you. We wanted something new, but we don't want to, completely go into unproven territory with Pierre Poilievre, who's not likable and whose policies
Right.
are echoing of MAGA. We don't want to go that direction just because we were tired of you. I mean, the risk is too great. It's like anything else, right? During peacetime, the considerations, Joel, are always different than during wartime.
Right.
It just changes everything. It changes how we calculate our own risk, how we look at our families, how we look at our futures. So, I mean, it essentially boils everything down to a very, very strong set of emotions. And so we looked at Trudeau and thought, yeah, okay, you weren't that bad, but and now that we're in a crisis, you're standing up for us and you're resolute, and that's
Well,
great. You know,
even his just his detractors, the day that Trump initially leveled the 25% tariffs, and he stood to the microphone and
yeah.
said, "This is going to be tough, but we're going to get through it. Like we're Canadians. We're going to stick to it." Even his detractors were complimenting, like, "This is what a prime minister should do, say, and this is how our prime minister should look like in a time of crisis that we've never." There's no one that you can call upon to say, hey, Jean Chrétien, Stephen Harper, how do you guys get through this? This is a unique time, and he really rose to the occasion in my opinion on this. And so I
And so
agree with
did Jean
you.
Chrétien. In fairness, so did Chrétien. When Chrétien wrote that op-ed on his 90th birthday, I think it was right at about the time where
Right, right, right.
Canadians, I mean, I put the marker down on the radio back in December that Trump wasn't messing around, that this wasn't internet trolling. I knew that it was manifest destiny nonsense because I've been following the far right in the US for years.
Hmm.
Um, but it wasn't until really that Chrétien wrote that op-ed that Canadians really crystallized the danger that we're in. And saw a former prime minister say, essentially the precursor to elbows up. That was an important moment, So both Trudeau stepped up in that moment, but also since you referenced Chrétien, he did as well.
it, you're right. I as well as Stephen Harper as well.
Yeah,
I'm going to give credit where credit is due.
sure.
Um, but that is past tense, and let's look to the future. And ironically, I guess we're also looking to the past because I might the conservatives, and this is something I had a hard time wrapping my head around, was I'm going back to the trucker convoy during the pandemic, and we also have those images of Michael Cooper glad handing, these are great Canadians and all the, they're just patriotic Canadians with a Nazi flag
Mm.
waving in the breeze behind him, saying these are good Canadians. I never understood how could how can you do that and with a straight face and say that, like, and I'm glad we're starting to see that narrative being reclaimed by the normal people, that these were not patriotic Canadians fighting for the rights. These were, I'm going to say, anarchists and terrorists. To wave a swastika on Parliament Hill, put in the hands of the Terry Fox statue. These are not good people. And for the conservatives to side with them, I was always puzzled, like, how are we not eviscerating the Conservative Party for this? And I'm glad to see that finally the Liberals are starting to remind people that this is what that party decided to do, not just one person, but the party
Mhm.
clamped onto this. I'm
Well, I
going to
mean,
throw it
look
back
at
to you.
Trump. Look at Trump. Good people
Yeah,
on both sides when they were
right.
walking around with their tiki torches. I mean, that's what started Biden to run against him in 2020. So, I mean, the fascist threat is real. MAGA is a fascist movement, and we've seen Maple MAGA in Canada for years. We've seen the rise of hate. You know, Hamilton was the hate center of Canada a number of years back. We literally had to stand on the front. We had to get community leaders, had to get crowds together every Saturday to chase the yellow vesters off our front porch of our city hall. So,
Mhm.
I mean, none of this is unfortunately a surprise to me. And so when we saw the Conservative Party flirting with the convoy, I mean, Elizabeth May was on the O show, an epic episode this week, and she went everywhere, including she talked about the trucking convoy as being something that came out of the Republican, MAGA movement in the United States and the funding for it, and it was a test to see if trucks could take over a capital city, right? Like, I mean, and then it was replicated in other countries. We're facing a fascist movement, an uprising around the world. It is what it is. They almost won in Germany. They almost won in France, right?
Right.
I mean, so I think we call it what it is. It's fascism. It's terrifying. It seems to follow a pandemic and then an economic crisis and then the rise of fascism and hate and then a world war. So, I mean, we are in a 100-year cycle of hell right now. And it's important that we know the moment that we're in so that we can fight. And what blows me away, Joel, is that people are watching from around the world. And they're saying that Canada is like, I heard this morning from Charlie Angus. I mean, that we're being seen as being the front line. What a horrific thought. I mean, I've spent the last 2.5 years thinking the Ukrainians were the brave people on the front line fighting
Hmm.
against Putin's fascism. And here now we're being seen as being on the front line against the fight for our own democracy. I never wanted to be in this place. I don't think a Canadian does. And so, looking at the cozying up with the MAGA movement, from relationships to meeting with, heads people from parties in other countries that are part of the fascist movement. I mean, there's too much, in my mind, proximity to the worst elements of the American fascist movement happening with our conservative party. If you can even call them a conservative party. To me, they're Maple MAGA. I mean, you get people like Elon Musk and Alex Jones supporting what you're up to. I mean, how is that something that
Well,
that Polyev should have he should have disavowed them each time, but we're not seeing that robust pushback. In fact, we're seeing Danielle Smith say that he's in sync with the new direction of the United States.
well, I find that that's, again, I mean, Pierre Poilievre, his entire slogan was Canada is broken,
Right.
and the idea that we're this divided country, which is malarkey in my opinion, because we've never been more united than. I mean, you go coast to coast to coast, and you say elbows up, everybody knows what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I do kind of want to talk about the difference between Ontario and Alberta. Pierre Poilievre clearly aligned himself with Danielle Smith. He is counting on her support and her base to help win Alberta, and I think to a lesser extent Scott Moe in Saskatchewan as well. I don't know how successful that will be. Time will tell. But here in Ontario, this podcast has always said you need the 905 to win the country.
Absolutely. Yep.
And Doug Ford, in a recent article in the Toronto Star, pretty much said, like, I'm not helping Pierre. I am not endorsing Pierre. I'm not my people will not be going out to help knock doors, to make phone calls, fundraise, any of that. And I'm wondering, is the Conservative Party of Canada itself a divided piece. Like you talk to the Liberals, even to the NDP, Green Party, they are united.
Yeah.
Policies are different, but all of them are united in the idea of a strong
Mhm.
Canadian front against Donald
Yeah.
Trump. And I get the sense that the Conservative Party of Canada is itself divided, and internally about, well, how do we approach this? Do we cozy up and try and win favor, or do we dig our heels in and say no?
Well, I mean, it's all over the map, right? It's all over the map. So you see, Sheila Copps posted something on, she's former, wasn't she deputy prime minister at one time? She posted something this morning about the fact that, connections within Poilievre's circle were reaching out to Trump's inner circle to get him to endorse Carney. Now, I'll wait to see that proven out somewhere. I'm not going to take it just off of a tweet, but we certainly saw Trump try to do this thing with Laura Ingraham on Fox, saying, you know what, that Carney would be working with a liberal would be easier because Poilievre, stupidly doesn't give him enough love or whatever. I mean, Elizabeth May said on my program that that's just reverse psychology. We all saw it for what it is. So we're looking at it, and so you see them trying to maybe make it look like Trump wants Carney, but then you hear Danielle Smith say on Breitbart Radio that Poilievre is in sync with
Mhm.
the new direction of America. So I mean, which is it? And Scott Moe, where's he going to drop now? Because if even Doug Ford, who has been, flip-floppy on this whole thing with Elon Musk, he hasn't exactly been strong as Captain Canada. Doug Ford is saying, hello, no, you know what I mean? Not wanting to tie myself to this brand of Poilievre. Is Scott Moe going to keep being a holdout in this Canadian United Front, or is he going to realize that Danielle Smith made a massive mistake, no matter how much her office is saying it was false and offensive, that people took it the way that they did? I mean, we heard it with our own ears, right? Like we can hear.
Mhm.
So I mean, is Scott Moe going to continue to be the standout and align with Smith when Smith's fortunes are going down? And let's face it, right now, if there was an election right now, based on the polls, the aggregate of the polls we're seeing, it wouldn't even matter what people in Manitoba voted because this would be locked up by the time it hits central Ontario. That's the way it went with the Sunny Ways thing with Trudeau. By the time it got through Quebec, there was so much red on the map that it wasn't even going to be, you might as well go to sleep in Vancouver. The decision was made. So, I mean, if there is going to be this binary decision where truly the NDP is not in contention because Jagmeet has not been a strong leader, he's been wishy-washy, and
Mhm.
people don't want to, waste a vote. They want to make sure that they're stopping Trump. We could very much be in a position of a liberal majority. Also, though, we are in day one. And already in day one, we have a premier's office telling us that what we think we heard is false, right? We are going to be hit with more BS and propaganda in the next however many days. It's going to make our heads spin. So I'm not saying with any confidence that Carney's got this in a lock, but I do believe that Canadians are going to be, deciding between one of two options in this election.
On that note, what are your opinions on Mark Carney's performance so far? I'll be truthful. I've been impressed by his directness and his approach to this. I think he's taken advantage of his very short term as prime minister so far to honestly get some really impressive gains. I thought it sent a message politically and diplomatically. His first visit wasn't to the United States. It has always been traditionally the president comes here or we go to Washington as a symbol of the unique relationship that we do have with the United States. I found it telling that he did not. He chose to go to France and then Britain. I thought his promise that by July 1st we're going to get interprovincial trade barriers torn down, and and clearly he has a plan for Canada. I'm looking forward to this campaign to hear kind of what I'm hoping that will be fleshed out a bit more with the Liberal platform. What does it say? What is your opinion on that performance so far? And maybe contrast it to Pierre Poilievre because I still have no idea what is his what will he do on day one? Because this isn't we're gonna have to develop the plan as we go. This is you get elected. You don't even have a celebration party. You get hit the ground running with a cabinet and start making moves. What's your take on the performance so far?
Well, I mean, Poilievre's upped his axe the tax to axe the taxes last night because Carney already took out the carbon tax
Right.
question. Poilievre is moving from a slightly less Canada's broken to a, well, it's not America's fault that we're in this situation because Canada's weak position. I mean, he's not very good at the pivot, and he does still appeal to people who are very, very angry and blame all that has happened in their lives on the Trudeau government. And there are going to be people who look backwards and want to punish. I mean, that's the retribution that Trump ran on. And you know what? He is like out there saying, the last 10 years, blah, 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 calling it the lost decade. He's trying to make people feel angry and want, as he says, change or whatever. I mean, but he can't get out of the morass that he's in. His legs are stuck in the mud of 2 years of trashing the country. And so trying to suddenly look like he's the guy to lead the charge with optimism and enthusiasm and a good plan is kind of hard to see for anybody who's watching, hence the polls, right? And then you look at Carney, and I thought last 9 days of his job interview have been quite stellar. I mean, the amount of achievement, the amount of meetings, the amount of announcements, the amount like setting that timeline, the whole conversation around Canada being 13 economies. I've never even really heard that articulated by a
Hmm.
politician before. Carney pops in and suddenly he's like, listen, we got to unite these 13 economies. We're going to be an energy superpower. He starts making these multilateral trade things, getting tech from Australia that was going to go to the US. I mean, it's like watching somebody competent and positive take over an organization in crisis. And he's proven himself. And you know what? If he can keep doing that, I don't think Poilievre, other than for his base that are, upset and who really, really hate the liberal brand, which is fair, his base. I don't think are going to be enough to carry him if Carney continues to look competent. At the end of the day, when we all go to bed and think about our children and our future and our jobs and our bank account and our freedom, I want to know that the person who's going to run the country is smarter and harder working and more disciplined and more optimistic and more, globally revered than I am. And that's Mark Carney. That's not Pierre Poilievre.
I wanted to bring the conversation a bit more locally down to the 905. And I think this argument, oh, I mean, this unprecedented situation that we're in, where we have a president who really just kind of makes decisions on a whim, and there's nobody in the American government to check
Mhm.
whatever he says. I mean, I've never seen this before in American governance. We in the 905. You're in Hamilton. I'm in Burlington. We're an hours away from the American border. Initially that was the it used to be an idea of like we're only an hour away. We can jump across the border, get some great deals on some the factory outlets, get some deals on a new outfit, new shoes, go for a bite to eat with the fam, come on back for a day trip. And now we're looking like they're an hour away. If we are like the front line, if Donald Trump decides one day to say, you know what, I'm going to I want to reposition the American border, and I want it to go, Southern Ontario is now Southern America, whatever. What like has that changed the dynamic here in the 905? Are we now looking at this as like we are on the front, literally the front line of this weird moment in time?
You know, my late mom used to tell me stories of our ancestors who helped during the War of 1812 along the Niagara River, right? Um, and they were Empire loyalists, and like all the stories that I would hear about my ancestors always seemed kind of interesting, but not really something I could emotionally connect with or understand. Now, when you think of those tanks, the column of tanks that were moving towards Kiev at the start of the second phase of the Russian attack on Ukraine 2.5 years ago, because of course they took Crimea back in I think 2016. Um, you can imagine that coming down the QEW. It's terrifying. Like it's
Hmm.
it's it's objectively terrifying. And so I don't think as Canadians we should say, oh, that'll never happen. Oh, like I said from the very beginning, when Trump said he's going to use economic force, when you decide you're using force, you're not negotiating in good faith. Force is force. Thank goodness it's only economic at this point. But now we're seeing like top American leaders saying, don't worry, Canada, most of the US military wouldn't be okay with a military incursion into Canada. It's like, why do you even have to say that out loud?
Right.
How has the Overton window moved so fast, right? It's moved. So we should be alarmed and we should be strengthened by the knowledge that the world is with us. We are part of the NATO alliance. There cannot be a foot on our territory without a NATO response. We're not alone in this. And much of the world loves our fighting spirit because they too fear their inevitable you know, confrontation with Trump's regime. So I mean, it's changed the 905's perspective. How could it not? But also when I talk to people in Winnipeg, they're very concerned about their strategic location vis-a-vis Russia and the
Mhm.
US working together, right? You look at the coast, they're quite concerned about what's happening in the North Atlantic. I mean, so we are unfortunately listening to the drumbeats of war. And I hope, and you hope, and all Canadians hope, and all good people around the world hope that it is just a bully threatening to see what they can get away with, and resistance will slow their roll. But we have to resist. And so the idea of a federal election coming down to a ballot question of who is going to actually resist, I think we can see. Mark Carney has said to Trump, there will be no tete-a-tete until you show us some respect. I mean, isn't
Well,
that isn't
I,
that
I,
what we want?
I do like that. I like the idea. Like we're not. I'm not talking to you until you start treating us
Right.
like an adult. There is something I mentioned this on my 905 or extra minutes, and I'm going to give it away because why not? But there's something that I've noticed a difference in approaches to this dilemma that we're in nationally, and that is conservatives, small C conservatives, seem to approach this is a blip on the radar, and this is a temporary situation. Trump, 4 years, Trump's gone, and we'll be back to normal. I get the sense from liberals and progressive, they're kind of giving up on the American Canadian dynamic as it was. And they're saying something new is taking shape here. We can't, if the Americans were going to re-elect Donald Trump, knowing what he did in his first term,
Yeah.
there's something worse than Donald Trump in America. And
Well, there was, but I'm not sure that it will continue given. So here, my great hope for America is that their sense of entitlement is going to stop the regime that is trying to steal from them. I mean, that is my big hope that the American people will rise up and say, you cannot take my Social Security checks, you cannot take my
right.
401ks, you cannot take my job and let me have a downgraded lifestyle. Like I'm hoping that the greed, which I think has animated much of American success, is going to also animate their resistance. I think we're seeing a revolution against King Trump happening in the US. You look at the anti-oligarchy tour with AOC and Bernie Sanders getting 35,000 people out to events. I mean, that is something, right? So, they if they can sort their own house, then their neighbor's house is not going to catch fire. But they need to get their own conflagration under control. And you know what? Trump might just be less of a sort of long vision Putin autocrat and more of an opportunistic,
Mhm.
con man. And maybe this will not be a big deal, and we can all get back to loving our American neighbors. But I mean, we still love them. We just can't trust them at the moment. We can't visit them. It sucks. I go there all the time. I have family in Cleveland and Florida. Like I was talking to an American this
Right.
morning from New York who said that he's going to visit his family. He's afraid it might be the last time. He's afraid it might be the last time that he can cross that border and not and be able to go back or like imagine how much it sucks for Americans who are not dyed-in-the-wool Trump fans, right?
And that,
So,
and
so
that's,
I have to believe, Joel, that I have to, the hope in me believes that the Americans will that darker American thing going on than Trump that
yeah.
you're alluding to. I have to hope that they will learn a hard lesson quickly and turn around.
I guess my question though here north of the border, well, we can only wait for them to figure it out. We
Mm,
can't force them to.
yeah.
There seems to be two paths in this country, and one is the conservative. small C conservatives seem to be like, again, they're going to figure it out. 4 years, we're back to normal. There's another trend that I see like kind of the Carney Avenue taking is that, well, they'll take their time to figure it out. The Americans, we don't have that luxury. We need to start forging alliances
Absolutely.
with Europe, Australia, Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, and other like-minded countries. Are we seeing like 4 years is a long time in politics? Are we going to look at, is that it? Do we just hunker down and wait for the Americans to sort their
No,
stuff out, or
God,
do,
no.
or do we just say, no, what, the world's a bigger place, and we need to find a bit more ambitious spot in it than America's younger brother?
Yeah, there's 350 million Americans. They have the strongest military and economy in the history of the world, but they don't have as big of an economy or as big of a population or military as the rest of the world. You know what I mean? And so, especially when it comes to trade routes, there are the BRIC nations now have more wealth than the G7. And so now Russia's part of the BRIC, and who knows where China and India and all this are going to fall out as we're kind of feels like we're in a world war. People are aligning.
Mhm.
But the reality is that there is money to be made and shared and prosperity to find and trade to find. And Carney has exquisite relationships with the leaders in European countries with big economies who he can do trade deals with. I mean, Polyev doesn't. That's just reality. If I'm in business and I'm hiring a salesperson, I want to hire a salesperson who's got contacts, not a person who's doing cold calls, right? So we have in Carney, someone who understands the economy, has the relationships, can sell our wares, can, get people to defend us and stand up for us. And so we have to do that immediately all the time, all the things. And Carney's doing that. And that's what I see. While Polyev is still, sort of speaking in these echo chambers of anger, Carney is out there leveraging his career and his contacts for the good of our country. And you'd have to be really not paying attention or really into sort of the MAGA narrative in Canada not to see that we have somebody doing a good job in this crisis, and that's Mark Carney. So while the Americans sort it out, I mean, we should support them in solidarity for those who are fighting, and I try to do that. I try to repurpose their stuff and retweet it and everything else I can do to support and champion the voices who are putting their lives at risk in defiance, right? Um, that Trump kidnapped people, sent them on a plane to an El Salvador prison,
Mhm.
without due process. If that doesn't strike fear in the hearts of a Canadian actress was taken at the border, the southern border, and put in restraints. Like what is happening, right? So we want them to get through their horrible mess, but it's not going to be over in 4 years. I mean, even if Trump is run out and Elon in record time, there are still going to be, and they'll have to be driven underground as a movement. It came up 100 years ago, it'll come up again. So it's never gone. Canadians, I don't know about you, but trust takes a long time to rebuild. And so it's going to be a generation or two before we look at America the same way. And just as an example, I know it's a small example, but my husband and I the other night wanted to, crash and watch a movie, put on Netflix, whatever came up, and it was a great American movie, Back to the Future. Who doesn't love Marty McFly? But I couldn't watch it because that America, the America we grew up with, the one that we rooted for in many ways, isn't the current America. And I'm like, I don't want to spend 2 hours looking at small town America. Like, it doesn't feel
Right.
like a welcoming, safe place. So, I mean, I think that impact on our zeitgeist, we're in fight or flight mode now, right? Cortisol is high. It feels like being back in the early days of the freaking pandemic. We're not going to forget that any more than we pause when we hear someone cough on a bus, right? We have fear, and that is hard to get out of your system.
I'll leave it at this because I know we have to get on with our day. I'd like to think that Canadians are the kind of people that we honor our friendships, but we'll never forget a betrayal. And I think that might be the American relationship going forward, is that no one in Canada is going to remember this. My children are growing up and this is their impression of America, and they are young, and they will carry this forward, and whatever they do in life, they're going to remember this. And I don't know what the future is going to be for American Canadian relations. I'm curious. Here locally, a lot of businesses do business south of the border. They send their wares and their goods along the QEW to cross the border, maybe they're going to be sending them to Hamilton Harbor to put them on ships to go to France or to Europe going forward. I don't know what that's going to be like. I mean, I think we're looking at it. This is one of those turning points where we're facing a real change in the Canadian identity. Uh, how that will turn, that's beyond my pay grade. But
And I think that goes to the question of the election, right?
right,
Because what I'm hearing from Poilievre is that liberals made us weak, therefore we are vulnerable. It's not the Americans' fault, it's ours. We should work with the Americans. And, if I'm in there, we'll do that. What we're hearing from Carney is his exact words, I think, yesterday, where, the shock of the betrayal has worn off, but we can't forget the lessons, right? Which is what you're saying. That was just his language around it. And so how do you go back to a bilateral trade relationship that is so significant that when it's threatened, it imperils your entire economy? I mean, now that we have realized that great relationship can go away, we can never just go back into it the same way, or otherwise we'd be fools, right? Now, I used to run a chamber of commerce, as you know, and I understand the U.S. bilateral trade relationship and how many businesses in Canada are going to be terribly affected by it. And I would hope that we can have robust trade with the United States, but hope is not a plan. And Carney's got a plan to diversify and create new trade routes, and that's just what we have to do in this moment. So, Poilievre isn't showing me a vision for what are you learning in this moment, and how does that change Canada's identity? But when I hear Carney say we're going to become stronger, we're going to become 13 economies united into one, we're going to be a resource superpower, an energy superpower. I'm like, okay, well, that's a vision. It's not the vision I had in mind, but I didn't know I needed a different vision than the one that we had. But now we have to have a different vision, and that's what leaders do, right? They show you the way. And as somebody said to me on social media the other day, isn't it nice to see a light at the end of the tunnel and know it's not a train this time, right? Like know that
right.
it's actually we can come out of this stronger. I mean, that's what we all have to work towards. So I'm very much hoping that Carney continues to prove himself, because he's rather an unknown quantity compared to Poilievre to a lot of Canadians. And I'm hoping that the Liberals don't let their foot off the gas for 1 minute. I like a
Mhm.
short campaign because you can focus more energy in a shorter amount of time. And I hope that we can come out of this election as a country more united, more focused, more replete with solutions, and with a new vision for our nation. But you're right, our kids, this is what they see of America. They will never know the America that we knew. And you know what? And they are going to have a different view of the entire world. And it's shocking that one man can do so much damage to a reputation and a relationship as Trump has done. But you know what? The American people wanted to experiment, and they have. And the experiment is, they're at 250 years, and their democratic experiment might in fact fail on them if they're not very, very quick to turn it around. So, yeah, these are crazy times, my friend.
That they are. Laura, thank you very much for coming on. I'm going to end it there because I know you and I could be going on for the rest of the day talking about woes and possibilities and whatever have you. But
Yeah.
thank you very much for coming on, uh, sharing your thoughts and what's going to be one of the more interesting federal campaigns, I think, in our lifetime.
Absolutely. Just watch for the propaganda, people. Think about everything you see and who it benefits. We're going to be inundated.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Nice to see you again, Jill.